It's pretty often I share my PC setup on social media platforms, but today I'm going to reverse that as I'm giving you lot the opportunity to showcase your PC and gaming setups in today's video. As I put out this poll or post on Twitter or X or whatever they call it these days, and quite a few of you got back to me, so I think it's time to showcase some of your setups in today's video. And the first one up today is Rugby 187 Gaming. You're quite a long lasting follower of the channel, so I appreciate your support over here, and your PC setup, mate, is looking pretty good. From what I can see, is that a Fantex Evolve, I believe they were called, or is it the EFU or something along those lines? Anyway, it was quite a popular case way back when, and it's still quite a good case in 2024. Looking at the rest of your PC, and I mean, it looks pretty good to me. You've got a 360mm RAD on top, so your CPU is going to be cooled pretty nicely, and I don't have the specs to your system here, but it's looking like you're running AM4 or AM5 judging by the mounting point of your CPU cooler, and it looks like you're running a 7900 XT. I'd like to say it's definitely a pulse from Sapphire. Regardless, it's a very nice GPU, and obviously it's going to be a really good performer at both 1440p and even 4K. And even looking at your CPU cooler as well, you've got the temperatures and the usages and the wattage and so what of your processor on the cooler, and that's a pretty cool feature of some of these AIOs, as they do have sensors sort of, well, they hook into your sensors, I'd like to say, so that's pretty cool as well. I like to see stuff like that. And then the rest of the setup, you're running that stacked monitor sort of setup, which is something I wanted to try recently, but I just never got around to it, and I've kind of got a shelf above my main monitor, so it wouldn't really work out for me. But in your setup, it works perfectly, and I can see from the cable management, everything's nicely managed very well, and you've also got speakers pointing directly at you, so you've managed your speaker setup quite well as well. And for your controller, you're running the Xbox One sort of Series X controller, which is basically my go-to. I use an Elite Series 2, but still a very good controller. And you're actually using an EVGA mouse. This is probably not the first time I've seen someone use one of these, but still a very good mouse. And your keyboard, I'm not quite sure as to what that is, but it looks like a decent one. So overall, quite a nice setup. Next up is First Players. I've also seen you quite a lot on my Twitter interacting, so a big thank you for helping support and following the content. And your setup looks pretty nice, I'd like to say. You've got a dual desktop laptop sort of setup going along, so you're probably one for productivity, I'd like to say. And looking inside your rig, it's kind of hard to spot what's in there, but I believe that's a reference 6700 XT, which is one of my most favourite GPUs of all time. If any of you lot know me, I think the 6700 XT is probably one of the best value GPUs you can buy for new and probably used now as well. So great little GPU, 12GB of VRAM, excellent 1080p and 1440p experience from that card. From what else I can see, it looks like you're running an AM5 based system, as you've got the Wraith Prism cooler, which is probably the best stock cooler ever released, apart from maybe some of those early Intel ones. So I reckon you might be running something like a 3700X or something along those lines. I'm not too sure what you're running there. And then looking at the rest of your setup, it looks like you're using a Razer mouse. I'm not quite sure as to which one it is. It does look like an early Def Adder, so nice choice. I'm a big fan of the Def Adder. I have a V3 Pro and it's absolutely excellent in basically every single way. And it's looking like you're rocking that's either a 60 or a 75% mechanical keyboard. It does look like a 65 or something like that. Very good for competitive gaming. I personally use a Wooting 60 HE Plus when I'm playing FPS games, and that is a absolutely brilliant sized keyboard. So yeah, really love the setup. And your mouse mat is a very similar one to mine. I have the MM350 extended from Corsair. It looks like yours is slightly smaller than mine, but it's looking like it's getting the job done very nicely. So overall, very nice setup. And we have a small form factor build in today's video with D71 Gaming. Thanks for your submission. And this is I'd like to say, a very clean setup. I'm going to start off with your PC, as this is very interesting to me. You've gone small form factor, and I kind of like small form factor. I've never built with one as such, as I do quite like big PCs, as you can see behind me. but I do want to dabble in the small form factor world, and with builds like this, how can I not want to? And you've even dropped your specs in this, so you're running a 5600X3D, which is a kind of a rare processor because it was only available in, I believe, in Micro Center in the US and in Germany in some select retailers, so it's pretty rare. And you're also running a 4070 Super, which is one of my most favourite NVIDIA GPUs from the current generation, as I think it is probably the best value amongst the bunch, and paired with the 5600X3D, you're going to be having an excellent gaming experience at 1440p. And the rest of your specs for a gaming PC are looking brilliant with 32GB of DDR4, and you're also rocking a 2TB SSD paired with a 4TB as well, so you've got plenty of storage to last year. Looking at the rest of the setup though, and it looks very clean, I'd like to say. You've got a concise colour scheme here with the green, so you must be a big fan of the green colour scheme. And your monitor, to be fair mate, looks really good. You've got a 210Hz 1080p ultra wide, so that's perfectly fine for basically every single game out there. Many would argue that 1080p isn't enough in 2024, but if you're happy with your resolution, who's to say otherwise, eh? But overall mate, absolutely brilliant setup, and I love that small form factor PC, so great stuff. Next up is Andrew Crane, and like always I'm going to focus on the PC first. And in your before photo you had the god tier GTX 1080 Ti. If any of you lot know anything about me, you'd probably know that the GTX 1080 Ti is my most favourite graphics card of all time, just because of how much of a legend it is. It's like 7 years old now and it's still like relevant in modern AAA games, particularly at 1080p, and it will hold up with the likes of something like a RTX 3060, maybe it might lag behind, but still the 1080 Ti is an absolutely brilliant GPU. But you also upgraded it to a very nice one as well with a 6750 XT. As you know, as I've actually said previously in this video, the 6700 XT and by extension the 50 XT as well are brilliant graphics cards. For 1440p and even 1080p, they're absolutely excellent value with that 12GB of VRAM and just excellent rasterization performance. So long as you don't want to enable ray tracing, you're perfectly fine with these GPUs. But the PC is looking nice and clean made. That is the Fractal Meshify C. Yeah, it's Meshify C, it's quite compact, so nice build. The GPU fills it out quite nicely, and you've got all RAM slots filled up as well like me. It's not technically the best sort of practice, I'd like to say, but if it's working for you, it's working for you like it does for me as well, so great stuff there. Back to the setup, it looks like you're running that sort of classical dining room table sort of setup. We've all been there. If it works, it works. And looking at your keyboard, it looks like either a K70 or a Strafe. Either way, brilliant keyboard. I've had both of them actually. I've had a Strafe Mark II and I've also had a K70. Both were excellent keyboards. And your single monitor setup is looking like a great one with your speakers either side it, even though one of those speakers is slightly being covered by the monitor, but that's fine regardless. Also, you got a similar style Corsair mouse mat to me, so big W there, and it's looking like you're running an M65 from Corsair as well, so you must be a massive fan of them. Either way, I quite like the setup, mate. Next one up is VRPJ22 with his retro build, and I really like this one because it is running a GTX 690, which is actually a GPU I've got it up here. There we go. The GTX 690 is actually a GPU I own, and it's a pretty cool card, I'll be honest, but it's very impractical in 2022, and I think this one's kind of broken because whenever it installs drivers, it just blue screens now. Hopefully that's not the case for you though, because I do like to see retro hardware like this, and it's looking like you're running a 1377, no, not a 13, that's a bit too new for this one. A 3770K clocked at 4.2 GHz, so that's a nice overclock on that, and you got it paired with 16GB of DDR3 memory, which is very nice for a rig like this. And you're also rocking a 500GB SSD, which is, I mean, back when this PC would have been like sort of the norm or a high end, a 500GB SSD was a lot back then, and you probably would have had this paired with like a 1 or 2 terabyte hard drive. which was very common back in those days. Either way though, I like what you've done with the cooler and the sort of the RGB cases. You're blending the new with the old, so that's the stuff I really like. Very nice retro PC there. I like it. Next one is from Stephen Games Boffin Cooper, and Mark, you've got quite a good setup here. You've got 3 PCs, each varying in their performance and their tasks from what it seems, and it's looking like you've got some like decent hardware here, all of which have 64 gigabytes of DDR5 memory, which is certainly not cheap, so that's quite all out there. And it's looking like your white PC is running a 6600 XT, which is a really nice graphics card, and it's looking like it's becoming the sort of the budget offering, which I'd recommend, as they're becoming like the same price of the 6600 now, so very good GPU there. And your next PC is a 6650 XT, which is a slightly better GPU. It's like a sort of factory overclocked and binned RX 6600 XT, and that is running with a 7800 X3D, which, as we all know, is probably the best gaming CPU on the market right now. It's definitely the one that makes the most sense, as we all know, it provides excellent frame rates for not consuming a lot of power, and it was relatively affordable at one point until the stock started to dry up, and then it just went up in price, but that's beyond the scope of this video. Either way, it's a very nice PC, and I'm guessing he's using it for esports games to get the most frames, as the GPU doesn't really matter that much as long as you've got something relatively decent, and the 6650 XT is more than decent. And then he's got his high-end PC, which is running a 13700KF, which is very similar to my CPU, albeit I don't have the FSKU, so I've got the integrated graphics. But for a gaming rig, which I'm guessing this is, it doesn't really matter that much. And speaking of the graphics, is running a Strix RTX 3090, which is still an absolute monster of a graphics card, similar to RTX 4070 Ti levels of performance, while having much more VRAM and probably more memory bandwidth, I'd like to say. Either way, the Strix model of these Ampere GPUs looks absolutely brilliant, particularly in white, and I really like that. You're also running the streamer cables, or the strimmer cables, or whatever they're called, them like the RGB GPU cables. They look pretty nice in this build. I'm not the biggest fan of them, but you've pulled it off very well in this with that sort of greeny glow. I quite like that, mixed in with the red of the rest of the build, and it just looks absolutely brilliant. So a nice build right there. I really like that. And then looking at the rest of the setup, the cables are kind of everywhere. I'll be honest, like mine isn't much better, I'll be honest, but what I'd probably do is took quite a few of those cables behind sort of the PCs just to clean it up a little bit. I know it's quite hard when you're using like VR headsets and that, as I can see you are a VR advocate, I'd like to say, so I'll try and clean up the cables quite a bit. But other than that, the setup's looking quite good. You've got one ultra wide in the middle, and then you've got another curved monitor off to your left, so you're spoiled for real estate with the monitors. And overall, quite a nice setup. I'll just give those cables a little bit of a tidy and you're definitely there. Next up is Catching King. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, but your PC build is looking absolutely clean. You're running an NZXT motherboard, which is quite rare. I don't really see people running these quite often, and it looks like, in all fairness, you're a fan of NZXT and their products, because you're also using one of their AIOs. I believe they're called the Krakens, and it's looking like you're running a, what's the case called now? Is it a H5 Flow? It looks a bit new to be one of those, but either way, your case looks absolutely brilliant, and you've gone for that all-white aesthetic. So naturally, a Gigabyte Aero card, or Vision D, I believe the Ampere ones were called, are going to be a natural selection, a natural GPU to buy. And even for your GPU, you thought about sag, so you've got a white anti-sag sort of stand for it, so you're not going to be getting any sag with that. And you're gone with all white cables as well, with black cable combs, which really ties in the theme of this build together, as there are black accents on the graphics card and the motherboard. And I think this Stormtrooper-esque PC build looks absolutely brilliant, so really good job with that. Carrying on with this theme is the rest of your setup. You've got a PS5 under your main monitor, which is actually looking like a relatively decent place to put it, and your Nintendo Switch as well is also, well, white and black, so that really ties into your theme. And it looks like you're on Twitter on your monitor with like some baby hippo or something, so Yeah, there is that. And you've also got a light above your second monitor. So are you a streamer maybe? I'm guessing you're a streamer. And then to tie in the rest of the theme is your chair, which is like sort of a off-whitey grey colour and black, which suits your setup really well. This is a incredibly clean setup and I really like it. Next up is BSP3 with a very warm looking setup, I'd like to say. I really do like the warm tones in this. It's very similar to my sort of setup. I don't like going with like the blues and that because the blue light does like make you tired and stuff. I'd rather go with the orange sort of light. And it's looking like you've gone with the same philosophy. You've got one ultra wide right in the middle and it looks like you've got it on a monitor arm as well. So very nice ergonomics right there. It looks like a absolutely awesome monitor despite the IPS glow in the top right corner. Yeah, I also have IPS glow as well. I know the pain. And it looks like you've got studio monitors here. Like, these are massive speakers and they look absolutely brilliant. You've got them positioned just right, pointing directly towards you. So 10 out of 10 for your monitor placement for both the monitor and studio monitors. And it looks like you're rocking a G502X Lightspeed. That's their newest G502. I'm still rocking the old Lightspeed, but from the looks of things I kind of prefer the older shape, but that's just my personal preference. And then again, the new one's newer, so you've already got a win there. One thing I can say is your chair is much better than mine. You've got the Herman Miller Logitech G Collab, and that is probably one of the best office chairs on the planet right now, as it's just incredibly comfortable. I haven't actually sat in one, but I just know from everyone I've heard it's one of the best office chairs. So massive W on buying one of those. You're really taking care of your sort of your back and your ergonomics. And then in the background over to your right you've got a monitor which it looks like you use for sort of a ambient fire, and I really do like that idea. That is a very cool concept, I'd like to say, so very good there. And in the corner I can see, I believe that's your PC. I can't see inside it, but it looks like it's quite a big one. So is it a full tower, I'd like to say? I'm not too sure what you're rocking in there, but I'm guessing it's got some very beefy specs in it. So overall, very nice setup. The cable management is looking, for the most part, very good as well. So very nice. And the last submission today is Slides, I believe your name's called. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but it looks like you need every single monitor in the world, and all the power to you, because that is the power of PC gaming. You've got 4 monitors in your setup, with your 2 main monitors being stacked upon each other. I quite like that. And you've got one vertical one off to the right of you. So I'm guessing, are you another streamer? I can't see any lights around, but I do see a webcam. I believe that's it looks like a Razer Keo, I believe it's called. But it looks like you might be a streamer, so let me know in the comments if you are. And then you've got another monitor off to your left. So you're definitely spoiled for monitor real estate here. And you've also got a professional looking sort of XLR mic. Yeah, that's definitely an XLR connection on there. So odds are you're probably a streamer. For the mouse, it looks like you're running a Razer Viper Mini, I believe that's called. It looks like a Viper and it's quite small, so I'm guessing it's a Mini. And for your keyboard, you're running a 60%er. Which one it is, I'm not too sure. It might be a Wooting, it might not, I'm not too sure. Look, let me know in the comments down below if you're watching this. But other than that, really nice setup. You've got a lot of mouse mat space there. I would probably clean up those cables in the back ever so slightly coming from your PC. Oh, and speaking of that PC, well, I can't really see much of it, but it's looking like you've got a fairly chunky graphics card in there, maybe something a bit newer. I'm not too sure what it is, and you're running a tower air cooler, and it's looking like a sort of like a compact mid-tower ATX sort of build. But either way, nice looking setup, nice looking build, and I really like the blue theme, so nice setup.